very much for coming. We have another session on the seminar.
So do you want me to talk in English or?
Better, I mean, teach for English or Spanish?
Chinese.
Chinese, I know.
Okay, so I'll.
Chinese or English? So now, Jose, do you prefer Chinese or English?
Chinese.
Okay, so it's a pleasure having José Correa here. José is a professor at the Universidad of Chile, and he's going to be talking today about optimal continuous pricing with strategic consumers. Thank you very much, José.
Gracias. So, do you prefer English or? Yeah. Okay, sure, no problem. So, what I'll be talking about today, so let me tell you what the problem is. I hope. Oh, okay, there is some minor part missing, but I guess it's not going to be a big issue. So there are a couple of. So there is a Chilean company actually, which is doing an interesting sales model, and they do the following. So it's called Compañía General de Remates, and they take used mining machinery like that truck there, and they announce a price that will go from $2.5 million to $800,000. And they say, they give you the price path for the next 200 or 100 days. I mean, depending on the product, they set up a different time horizon. But it's usually 6 months, the time horizon. So you come to their site, you see this price curve, and you make a decision on whether to buy the product now at the price that's posted or to wait for a lower price. You know that the price is going to go down. However, if you wait, you risk of not getting the item because it's sold already. It might happen.
Is it rent? Rent or sell?
Sell.
Sell.
Yes.
It's 1 unit?
Usually it's 1 unit because it's used machinery. So, I mean, usually all units are different. So they have multiple units, but each unit has a different, I mean, it's sold through a different price path. Okay, but these are like big units, so these are expensive things, no? So, and this is not the only case of this type of pricing. So Filene's Basement, who went bankrupt a couple of years ago, had this model, this pricing model for 80 years or something, no? So Filene's is a big department stores in the US. I don't know if you've heard of it. I guess so. And in their basement, they had this automatic markdown plan in which you have an item. So you go, you see it. The basement was for the leftovers inventory. So whatever was left over, they would put it in the basement. You go there, you see the tag, and the tag had the date. So you have a price, and you know that the price is going to be whatever today, 75% of that whatever in 1 week, 50% of that whatever in 2 weeks, 25% of that whatever in 3 weeks, and in 4 weeks is going to be given away for charity. So then again you face a problem of whether buy the product now, wait 1 week, wait 2 weeks, or whatever. Okay, but again, if you wait, you risk of not getting the item.
This is quite interesting because usually strategic customers, they do for commodities, they do the other way around. They actually want to price so that people will not wait for the future discount. They can buy now.
Right, but that's for commodities, probably, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, this is actually, even if this is not announced, so everyone that goes to buy like clothes or anything that's perishable, they go and know that the price is going to go down. So you know that when you buy a jacket, you know that by the end of the season, the jacket will be costing less. And now most people will anticipate this. So the fact that you announce it or not, it's I think, a second order effect. So people, I mean, my main question has to do with the fact that people anticipate that the price is going to go down and are strategic. So if they buy now, it's not just because their valuation is slightly above the price, but because their valuation is significantly above the price. Right? If I arrive at time t and my valuation is slightly above the current price, it doesn't mean that I'm going to buy. Right? It doesn't mean that I'm going to buy. Because if I wait, my utility will be higher. The price is going to go down, and therefore your utility will be higher, even though there is some probability of not getting the item when that happens. So I will assume rationality of the consumers and the seller, and therefore consumers anticipate this price path. This might be pre-announced, as in these cases I'm mentioning, but might not be pre-announced. And in any case, I will assume that consumers are clever enough to anticipate that this is going down. Okay, so that's the main motivation. So just to exemplify what's going on, so you go to the web page, you pick a product, and in that product, I think here I picked a product that was already sold, so then I'm getting minus 67 days and things like that, but it doesn't really matter. So so you see a curve like this. Now you come on any, so this is pre-announced, this is posted already, and now you make a decision on when to buy. Okay, and you buy whenever you want.
But that price path is given? Or
Yes.
You have to estimate it?
No, it's given. You go to the website and it's there. I mean, it's not, I'm not making this up. Okay? This is information like it's a print screen from their website.
So are they considering the firms, the inventory cost in their decision to sell like this?
I guess so. I mean, I assume they are clever. So I assume they incorporate everything. So they have their product, and they announce this price path, and that's it. So they should. They should. Okay? Maybe their inventory cost is not so high. I don't know. So, I mean, these are high-value products, so somehow maybe the price is more important than the inventory cost in this case. It probably depends on what kind of product we are talking about. No?
A similar problem is advanced selling. This guy who can make the same products of it, but including, the inventory cost.
Yeah, so yeah, Gustavo has different papers. In some they include the inventory cost, in some they don't. So both are.
You are not including it here in the decision of the seller?
No, but it would be easy to include it. I mean, it doesn't really make a big difference.
An auction, they want to get rid of it.
It's an auction with a very particular price mechanism, which is, yes, they want to sell the item.
Depending on what other options has, for example, are two tracks useful for him and have different curves?
Clients, I assume that they have evaluation for this item.
But for several items?
No, just for one.
Just for one.
Just for one. You can, again, extend things, but already for one item, this is a hard enough problem. So, okay, so the main issue with the natural, the classical revenue management is that you assume that consumers are myopic. So in all the classic stuff, you say that someone would buy an item if their valuation is above the current price. So if I value by 100 and the current price is 98, then I buy. And there is a lot of empirical evidence that this is not the case. So therefore, in the last maybe 5 to 10 years, there's been quite some significant work in trying to understand what happens with strategic consumers. And by strategic, you mean forward-looking. So they really know, they are clever, so they anticipate everything, and they make optimal decisions. So as I said there, consumers anticipate that the price will go down, may buy upon arrival, but may also wait. Okay? And the trade-off that's going on is that if I wait, I get an extra utility if I get the item, but the probability of getting the item is actually lower. So,
Do they have any guess of how many consumers, how many clients?
I will make the model precise in a second. So I'm thinking always of an electronic commerce example. Okay, that's so in my mind I have the example I presented, which is an electronic commerce example. So you go to a site and you have limited information. So you know the price path, but you don't know who else is coming and who's going to come. So, okay, so actually in the last 2 years, or maybe actually I should say 5 years, because this paper has been around for some time, there has also been some interesting work in the economics literature. So there is this Simon Board and Andriy Skripach that have this very nice paper in which they characterize the optimal dynamic mechanism. So I want to sell one item in discrete time. It's not continuous time, but then Heskov extended to continuous time. So in discrete time, I want to sell one item, and I have, say, customers that arrive according to some Poisson process, some other Markovian well-behaved process, and they're forward-looking, and you want to design the optimal mechanism, which may not be a price path, might be something different, no? I don't know if you know something about mechanism design, but it could be like, I wait until time 1/2, there I do a second price auction with some reserve price, otherwise I do something else, and it can be something more general. And so that's an interesting paper that will appear soon in the Journal of Political Economy. And okay, so I will try to describe the model I'm thinking. So I have a single item to sell over some fixed season, which I will denote 0t. And the seller problem is to choose a price path. So I will decide on what's going to be the price from 0 to t, okay, beforehand, and I will announce this price. Okay, and this is going to be the seller's mechanism. The seller's mechanism is going to be a simple price mechanism, in which if a customer comes at time t and decides to buy, she has to pay p of t. Then consumers arrive over time. For the most part, think that they arrive according to some homogeneous Poisson process of rate lambda, so simple, and and they're forward-looking. So they anticipate everything. But they arrive over time, and that's pretty important. So they're not all available at time 0.
Why do you do that? Because if it's a website and everyone has output information on the path, they know the information, so the consumers are there from time 0. They might write in terms of...
Not really. So I think there is quite some evidence that people do not make purchasing decisions or do not decide they're going to purchase at everyone at the same time. So people, I mean, at some point a company needs some machinery, and that's because they're all broke down. So that's a random event. And then at that point, that company starts looking for this product, right? Or at some point, you know that you have to go to a conference, and at that point, you come into the game, no, and decide to buy your ticket. And this does not, I mean, customers do not synchronize in this. And that's what's understood by dynamic mechanism design, no? The fact that people arrive over time. Okay, and that's what makes the problem hard. So that's one part that makes the problem hard, because you cannot compare really. I mean, there is, besides the evaluation, which is the normal thing in mechanism design, you also have the arrival time in the type of people, right? So, good. So we'll make a simple model now, and the simple model, it's standard for several of the literature. So I will assume that there are actually only two types of customers: those that have a high valuation for the item and those that have a low valuation for the item. And the high valuation I will denote by capital T. The low valuation I will denote by small v. Sorry, capital T, capital V, and small v. And let's say they arrive according to Poisson process. They may be non-homogeneous, so but think of it as homogeneous. Doesn't matter. Of rates big lambda and small lambda. Now there is one big difference with respect to what the economics people do that I will have here, which is the fact that I will assume that consumers, and this is standard in pricing but not in economics. So there is a difference here. So we will assume that consumers discount the rate much faster than the seller. Discount the future. So consumers have a discount rate mu, and I will assume that the seller does not discount the future. You can again extend this to different discount rates, but the fact that, the principle behind this is that the consumer really wants the product, and for the seller this is just capital. Okay, so the mining company not having the unit they need to produce copper is losing way more money than just the capital cost. Okay? And so for what for the presentation, I'm assuming that consumers discount the future rate mu, whereas the seller does not discount the future. So it's doesn't care about time. Okay, so let me explain you what are these expressions there. So these guys are fully strategic. So if I have some valuation for the item U, then what I want to maximize as a consumer is I arrive at time t, and then I have to find the time s at which my excess, so U minus the price, times the discount rate. Okay, so this is the way I discount the future. This is the precise way in which I discount the future. So I discount the excess over the price. I don't discount the utility itself. Times the probability of getting the item at time s, given that it's available at time t. So when I arrive, if the item is not available, then the game is over. So there's nothing to do. If the item is still there, I have to find this probability. And that's the utility for buying at time s, and that's what I want to maximize as a consumer. Okay? So excess, forget about the discount rate if you want. If you want to think about no discount rate, that's fine. Just think of mu equals to 0, and everything is going to flow nicely anyhow. So maximize my excess times the probability of getting the item. Okay? And now what's interesting here, what makes our life slightly easier, is that this event contains this one. So for getting the item at time s, it has to be the case that the item was available at time t. Otherwise, there's no way. And therefore, this probability is just the ratio of the two probabilities. And the probability of that the item is available at time t is independent of s, so I take it out of the maximum. So if I maximize this, it's the same as just maximizing this part. Okay, so I can think, so if you want to think of it differently, think of the following model. I look at the newspaper at the Mercurio on Sunday morning, and I see an offer for a product. Okay? And at that point, I decide to go to the store. So there is no conditioning. So I cannot condition the fact that it was available at time t because I don't know if the product is going to be available when I go there. So it's just the probability of getting the item at time s. So I just decide to go at a given time. Right? But it's exactly the same model. Now, at an intuitive, so not really at an intuitive level, but the probability of getting the item at time s, we have to actually make some small assumption on the mechanism, which is the following. So I will take f of s, the probability that the item is available at time s. Okay, and that's simply you look at the strategies of all the players and you can compute this number. And alpha of s, so suppose that several players want to buy at the same time. Like 3 players make a decision and they all want to buy at time 1. So what happens, I will assume that I will do random allocation, if that's the case. So I take the 3 guys, I flip coins, and I give it to a random guy. Okay, so that's going to be my alpha of s. So what's the probability of getting, and this is going to be independent of s. So these two probabilities are going to be independent. I do just a random allocation flipping coins. So the probability of getting the item at time s is going to be the product of this alpha times f. Okay? No.
Why don't you consider the loss when you don't get the item on your objective function?
Oh, if I don't get the item, sorry, I do. No, what's the loss? If I don't get the item, I get 0.
Yeah, but if you lose the machine, maybe your project will be I mean, you will have to delay your project.
Yes, but that would be like overcounting, no? I have evaluation for that. That would be like double counting, no? I have evaluation and I consider I want to maximize my valuation,
Okay.
right?
Evaluation is-
Right? So this is my valuation, this is the price, and this is the probability of getting it. This is what I want to maximize, right? If I don't get it, I get 0. Okay, so how does an equilibrium look like? So that's the first thing. What is an equilibrium in this context? It doesn't sound like very natural or very easy to define, but let me try to give it a try first. Let me try to first tell you a concept that's going to be useless, but I think it's good to understand the problem. So what is a pure strategy equilibrium? So a pure strategy is a plan for every buyer, every potential buyer, so that for every possible arrival time, this buyer, so I have buyer I, and I say for every possible arrival time, this guy will buy at time S, which depend on the arrival time. Okay? So this I will index by this HIUT. So a customer with valuation U, which is the ith customer, doesn't matter really, and arrives at time T, will buy at time HIUT. Okay, so that's going to be the plan for customer I. And then a bunch of, so if I take all these functions, so they are functions because they depend on T, I will need that this thing, so the buying time for customer I, for this customer, has to be at least T, of course, because I'm going to like go back in time. And it has to be maximizing the utility of the buyer. So this is the difference times the discount rate times this probability of getting the item at time S, right? So, of course, this age depend on, and that's why it's a game theory problem, no? This age depend on what the people is actually doing, but the solution, a situation in which this holds, would be an equilibrium. So unfortunately, in this game, there is no pure strategy equilibrium. Okay. Oops.
In the discovery, you put US.
Right.
It's made at time T.
At time T.
S minus T.
No, well, yeah, that's one thing. I should go back. Thank you. So this is the discounting. This is the way they discount the future.
Yeah.
Okay?
But the decision is made at time T. They
arrive at time T.
So, and it's probability. So it's making at time T is making a decision.
Right. So
the optimal is S, so the discount should be S minus T. Because
yeah, I mean, that would be one model. That would be one model. I would say this would be more standard in pricing. Yeah. That would be. Yeah, so I mean, there are different models for how do you discount the future. So there are models in which you discount your excess utility. There are models in which you just discount your valuation. And there are models in which you discount from the time you arrive or from the origin. There are many things. So the model we're taking here, I would say, is the most standard, which is everyone discounts from time 0. And the thing is the following. So with this model, you make that if two guys have the same U, they are equal at any time, right? So you can do the other thing by extending the valuations you can get. So it is equivalent if I can have any type of U's. It is not if I have only two valuations possible.
So Jose, if they have the same valuation, there would be a.
So if two persons have the same valuation, one arrives at time 0, another arrives at time 1. At time 2, they have this. They really evaluate exactly the same. This is what you do with this. If you would do as Herman suggests, they would be different. because they would discount different according to when they arrived. Okay? Okay, so this is an equilibrium, and wait, this is, okay, mixed strategies now. So given that there is no pure strategy equilibrium, this is not so hard to actually see. We will look at mixed strategies equilibrium. So in equilibrium, mixed strategies are situations in which these objects now are distributions over the future. So if I have a customer that arrives at time t with some valuation u, HIUT will be a distribution over t, small t, big T. So a probability distribution over the future, which will tell the customer when to buy. So the customer will flip a coin according to this distribution, and then will take a time to buy. And what you need is that the support of the distribution is actually a subset of the maximizers of the utility, of the overall utility. Okay, and actually it's not so hard to realize that you just need what we call a symmetric equilibrium, in which you don't distinguish by the index of the customer. So the index of the customer is irrelevant, and you just distinguish the customers by the time in which they arrive. So this would be the full picture. You take customers that arrive at time t with valuation u. They have these distributions over the future HTU. And the condition is that the support of these distributions, which are distributions over the future, is containing this. And F is computed as this thing, which is, I guess, you don't understand, and I wouldn't understand either. But this is simply the probability given the distributions of everyone. This is just the probability that the item is available at time t. Okay? So here I take, well, it's just that. This is the probability that you have k. Sorry?
The number of people that arrive at that time?
So no. The situation is the following. So you take all the distributions of everyone. So all the HUTs, okay, as input. And now you want to, and now with this you compute the F, which is the probability that the item is available at a given time. How can I compute that? I say, okay, I take k, the probability that there are k arrivals up to time t. What is the probability that the item is available at time t? I will say, is the sum of, I will say, how many arrivals do I have? Say I have k arrivals, condition, and now you condition and I have k arrivals, and I compute the probability that they all buy after t, which is 1 minus the distribution, right? I take the product, the integral of this thing, so this is just the probability that everyone that arrived before, all the k that arrived before buy after, and then I sum over k, right? And the same for the low and high valuations. So this is low valuation, this is high valuation. So
the function takes into account the valuation and everything.
The HUTs as the distribution of a customer arriving at time t with valuation u. Okay? So this is exactly the probability that the item, and that's why it's an equilibrium problem, because I cannot just, given the F, compute the H, or given the H, compute the F. I have an equilibrium problem. So the H depends on the F, and the F depends on the H, right? Good.
This is buyers without memory.
Buyers are forward-looking, so what do you mean without memory?
So if at time t equal 1, they know what happened after t equal 2 and so on. They are learning about,
They know everything that, yeah, they arrive at a given time and they start observing the system.
But you are not modeling because you don't have a state.
Yeah, but the thing is, think of the following. I'm an electronic commerce, so I go into this site and I start waiting. What can happen? The only thing that can happen is that the item is gone. Right?
Yeah, but you have a state variable.
Yeah, but what do I learn by waiting?
Because you don't have any idea about the available machinery of the.
Yeah, I have that. There is one machine. The machine is there or is not there.
You're updating the probability each time.
Yes, you update the probability each time, absolutely. But there is nothing that you can learn. So that I know when I arrive at time t, well, what I said in the beginning is it's quite critical, I guess. Yeah. So I maybe did it too fast. So what I do here is here I show you that conditioning on the information I have at time t is totally useless. There's nothing I can learn. I only see the system. I don't see if people come or not come because I'm on an online site. I only see when the item is, someone took it. And when someone took it, the game is over. So there's nothing more I can do. Then I just lost.
No, but let's say that there are 10 items on display.
Oh, but there is, okay, if there are 10 items, it's different. I agree.
You know, they
Totally agree. If there are 10 items, it's totally different. But here there's only one item. Mm-hmm. I agree it's different. Then there is a learning issue. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now what? Okay, so this is an equilibrium given the price function. Now the question is, what should the price function be? And now I will try to convince you that there are only two reasonable things to do as a price function. So one is to set the price to a constant equal to capital V, in which I totally ignore the low valuation customers. And then, as this is my price functions, a high valuation customer knows that the price is not going to go down, so he will just buy upon arrival and pay me V. Now, this might be optimal, and that's easy to compute, but it may not be optimal. So the other option is to take a curve like this red curve, in which the price stays somewhere between the two values, and at the end of the season, it goes to small v. Right? So this would be better if, say, there are only few. So there is, for instance, a high probability that no high valuation customer arrives, and therefore I'd better sell the item to a low valuation than not sell it at all. But I will never get the price down to small v before time t. That doesn't make sense, right? Because I don't discount the future. At time t, they will buy for sure because there's nothing else they can do. If someone arrives, it will buy at that time. And as I don't discount the future, this is not a big issue, right? So I will never. So the thing is that there are two potential optimal policies. One is constant pricing, and the other one is a markdown policy in which the price goes to small v only at time t. No, it's anything. The only thing I'm assuming is that P of t is between the two values for all t. Could be discontinuous, jumping, doing crazy stuff. It doesn't matter. And at time big T, it has to take this value.
So you're waiting for capital V customer until the end.
Right. Sort of. I have to wait for these guys. Yeah. Yeah, but you have to be careful because if you do this, if you just set, so that's one option. So why is that not optimal? So let me just try to explain you why setting the price to the blue line and at this time jump it to this value, that may not be optimal. Why? Because now a high valuation customer, if it buys upon arrival, it gets essentially zero utility or very little, just epsilon, right? But if I just wait, there is a chance that no one else arrives. So maybe if I'm a big valuation customer, I just wait until time t and then try to buy it at this price. You see? And that will happen actually. That's what will happen if you do that. So you have to consider something with this. You have to consider that consumers are strategic and that you should, and that your price function has to anticipate this fact.
When do they buy?
It depends on the price part, no?
If it's a capital V, if it's a high valuation customer, when would that customer buy?
Under which
Under
price path?
the markdown.
under the red one? Yeah, I don't know. It's not clear. Because if I arrive here, if I buy upon arrival, I have this profit, right? But if I wait until here, I have this profit, but a lower probability of getting it. And if I wait until here, I have all this profit, but an even lower probability of getting the item.
So they get guessing at the middle of the period.
Yeah.
Will that guy buy or not?
It's not clear. You need to...
I mean, one is more risky than the other for the seller, right?
Yeah, but I mean, now you can do any function. And the question is, what is the best function for the seller, right? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you what's the best function for the seller.
Do you consider the thing that this policy will continue for other products? So if people...
No.
No?
I don't consider anything I didn't consider in my model, right?
The sellers start doing like a constant policy, then the other consumers for future products will say, oh, this guy never drops the price.
Oh, no. But I assume that the seller even announces the price bar. So, and it has commitment power. So I say exactly what I'm going to do, and I do it. Right? So you are a consumer, and you know that this guy is a serious guy. Okay? So.
Can you repeat why it cannot be lower than C?
Well, it doesn't make sense. There's no one having lower valuation. Okay? And therefore, it can be like small v minus epsilon, so that the consumer gets some revenue, but it doesn't really matter, no? It can be arbitrarily small, that epsilon. So what I do is up to v, and then the consumer will buy. The consumer with low valuation has to buy. There's nothing better they can do, right? And then why would I go even further down? I will get less, as a seller, I get less revenue, and the guy will buy anyways. Like suppose I'm selling something to you, I know that your valuation is 1,000. I mean, why would I charge you 800 for that product if I know that your valuation is 1,000? Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me try to write down the until what time do I have? Like essentially
20 minutes.
Okay, so plenty.
So what is the distribution of high and low valuation?
Oh, I will solve the problem. So what's the
distribution of high and low valuation?
Those arrive according to some Poisson process, non-homogeneous Poisson process of rate big lambda of t, and the others according to small lambda of t. It's arbitrary, essentially.
So the seller knows the proportion, right?
Seller knows the rates, yes, the arrival rates, and it will set up what's the best function depending on those rates, of course. Okay, so one thing that's pretty easy to realize is that the constant pricing policy has revenue equal to big V times the probability of selling. And the probability of selling is 1 minus the probability that you have no arrival. So this big Q is the probability, big Q0 is the probability of having 0 arrivals of high valuation customers. Okay? So it's just 1 minus that. That's something you can compute easily. And now you have to compare it with the optimal policy that actually marks down. So, so the whole problem is to compute the optimal markdown policy. What is the best price function that has to go to small v at time big T? And for that, we actually first write down the problem. So let me try to convince you that this is the problem. So if I sell, what is the probability of selling at price T, at price P of T? Well, it's the differential of this 1 minus F, right? F is the probability that the item is available. 1 minus F is the probability that the item is not available. And the derivative of that actually represents the probability of selling exactly at that time. Right? So it's the probability that is not available at some time minus the probability that is not available a little bit after that divided by epsilon. And that's exactly the probability of selling the item at that time. So this is the revenue I get during the 0t interval, and there is some extra revenue, so for high valuation customer, and there is some extra revenue that I get if no customer of high valuation arrived, and if no one arrived, what is my extra value? I mean, my extra revenue is small v times the probability of selling it to some low valuation customer. The probability that there is at least one of these guys is 1 minus q0 small q. Okay? So with probability q0 of t, this here nothing happens, so I didn't sell to any of the big valuation customers, and I have to sell it to a small valuation customer. Good. And now the constraint.
No discount factor.
No, the seller does not discount the future. What I mean, it's very easy to extend to any situation in which the seller discounts the future slower than the customers. Okay. Now, the constraint, which is actually the hard part of this thing, is that I'm optimizing overall P's such that there is an equilibrium for this game. And there is an equilibrium is writing down the equations I had before. Okay? That's what we have to do. And it's actually not so hard to do it. What we do is the following. Let me try to give you the idea of how this is done. So when you take a customer, consider this set S, which is the times at which the item may be purchased. So someone might want to buy at time t in S. So if that's there, cannot get there anyhow. So in the expression there, this alpha of t times f of t times e to the minus mu t times big V minus p of t. So now I'm only looking at the high valuation consumers, of course. So these are the only guys I care now. The price is going to be only for them, essentially. The low valuations will never buy. So if I am at the time in which someone might want to buy, just might want to buy, it is for sure the case that this is bigger than that the utility he gets is bigger than this alpha q0 v minus v. So that's like the utility he would get if he waits until the end. So any customer can wait until the end. If I wait until the end, how much do I get? Well, I get less than that number. So what is that number? That number is big V minus small v. Small v is the price at that time. Remember that I'm always looking at a situation in which the price goes down to small v. So I get the difference of the two valuations, which is the margin I get, times the discount rate, times the probability that no one of high valuation arrived, times this alpha, which is just the probability that I win the lottery with all the small valuation customers. Okay, that alpha is the probability that me, the big valuation, the high valuation customer, wins the lottery against all the small valuation customers. Okay? So that's the QK divided by 1 plus K. So the probability that there are K other guys, there are K other small valuation customers, and then the seller will take one at random. I am there waiting for the price. These guys are also waiting, so the probability I get it is 1 over the number of people, 1 plus K, right? So if someone wants to buy at time t, it's because that inequality holds. And actually more needs to hold, but at least that holds. That's for sure holds. And that's essentially what we need. Now what you do is, well, alpha of t is a probability, so it's at most 1, so I get rid of the alpha of t. First thing. And therefore, I can obtain a lower bound on P of t, which is this. This is just the same thing as they're getting rid of the alpha of t. It's the same inequality, just taking P of t out of this. And now, what you do is the following. I want to evaluate this quantity. So G is 1 minus F. So this is exactly the first part of the objective function, the difficult part of the objective function. And this gives me an upper bound. So I will say, okay, this is the integral I want to evaluate. The seller wants to evaluate. So it's price times probability of selling. And I say that if I am outside S, this set that I haven't even defined properly, but it's the set of times at which anyone can buy. If I am outside S, then there is 0 probability I sell, right? Because those are times which are not interesting at all. Therefore, this integral has to be equal than this integral, which is this is only over S, and this is between 0 and t. Okay, and this set S is obviously measurable with respect to this measure, but that's very technical, so I shouldn't enter into that discussion. And good. And now I have over t in S, I have this inequality. So I put it here. I do the computations, and trust me that you get this thing. Not very, I mean, this is very straightforward calculation. Okay, so you get that expression as an upper bound on the profit that the seller can get. I mean, the rest of the profit is pretty easy to evaluate. These are just, I mean, Poisson distribution, so these probably is, you know, explicitly, these numbers. So the hard part is the integral. So, okay, good, you get that upper bound. And you get that upper bound. And now the funny thing is that if you take, so there's one more step that I didn't do, but I don't think it's very important. And now we will choose a particular price function, which is actually discontinuous. And for this price function, so this price function is exactly this thing in the interval 0t, and small b at time t, at time big T. Okay, and that's not continuous. That's one thing. It's not completely direct from there, but there is a jump. For sure, there is a jump. So the function will go down until time t, and at time t will jump to small b. Okay? And if you take that function and you compute the revenue of the seller, I mean, first, if you take that function, then you easily prove that buying upon arrival is an equilibrium. Okay, every high valuation customer will buy just at the time they arrive. Actually, this price path is exactly the price path that makes you indifferent for all the future. And therefore, buying upon arrival is an equilibrium. Therefore, it's easy to compute the f of t, which is the complicated part, because now I know everyone buys upon arrival, so the probability that the item is available at time t is just the probability that no one arrived, which is a Poisson distribution, easy. So you just compute this thing, and you obtain the exact same thing as before, as the upper bound. So this has to be optimal. Overall possible price functions. Okay? So that's the, I mean, it's kind of magic, but it's the way it goes. And then you can play around. So now that you want to see which one is better, the constant or the other, so you just evaluate the function. So constant policy has some revenue, markdown policy has some revenue, which we know exactly how to compute now, and then you get the better of the two. You get the better of the two. So from the point of view of mechanism design, this is I think pretty interesting. So one nice observation is that you get more revenue than the optimal mechanism for the same setting. So I could say, assume everyone arrives at time 0. So everyone that will arrive arrives at time 0 with this probability distribution, whatever. And I do an optimal mechanism. If you do an optimal mechanism, well, I don't know if you know anything about mechanism design, but do you? Not really? Okay, so an optimal mechanism here is a bit weird. So what's an optimal mechanism? It's the optimal way of selling an item. So a mechanism is just an allocation function. So you say you submit bits, and I define a priori an allocation function that depends on your bits, and a payment function that depends on these bits. And the optimal way, so second price auction is very typical, or first price auction is very typical, but the optimal mechanism here is kind of strange. So you use a second price auction with a reserve price, but if all bids are below some threshold, you do random allocation that you can compute. But in any case, the optimal way of selling gives you some revenue, which is lower than this, and the difference is that pink term there, which is positive. I mean, it has two minus signs. And the reason is that you are using the fact, you're using consumers impatient to get more revenue. That's exactly the intuition behind this. So you're just using the fact that consumers are impatient. You are not impatient, and consumers are. And you are using that fact to get extra revenue. If mu equals to 0, this is 0. There is no extra rent for using consumers impatient. Good. So, okay, I think I will skip this part. So we can. Sorry.
Let me try. So if there is no discount on the time, both will be the same. So
yes, the optimal. Yeah, that's also not completely obvious, but this price path it will give you the same profit as the optimal mechanism. And this price path it will be, I mean, if there is no, it will be like doing a first price auction, and then jump to a random allocation, which is what Meyerson would do here. Okay, so I will skip this part. So we can prove that for a large class of price functions there exists equilibrium in mixed strategies, but that I will skip. It's a bit technical. But now I want to show you an approach. It's just an idea. It's not really something we can solve properly for the general evaluation case. So as Herman already noticed, it would be interesting to extend this to general evaluation and not just two evaluations. So now the situation is the following. Say buyers arrive according to some Poisson process. You can assume constant rate. I don't really care. But now the evaluation is drawn from some continuous distribution F. Everyone has evaluation which is different, essentially. And I want to find the best price function. So I have the same problem, but now rather than having just two evaluations, I have a continuum of evaluations. Right? So how do we do that? Well, we don't solve it, unfortunately. So what we can do is we can do some things. So we can prove that if you take a decreasing price function, then the equilibrium will have the form of a threshold. And the threshold form is, there is no marker here. No, there's no marker. On the other side. Okay, so let me try to just say it like this. So the threshold, oh, you have a marker? Great. Just one. Oh, thank you. So this will look a little bit like this. So you have, say everyone has valuation which is uniform between 0 and 1. This is valuation. And this is time. Okay. And let's say this is the price function. Now the price function doesn't need to go to any value, so it's just anything. And I will assume that this price function is nice, so continuous and, I don't know, differentiable, well behaved. Then the equilibrium will have the form of a threshold. So it will be something like this. And the idea is the following. This will be the threshold, which I'm denoting by psi. And this will be the price function that I'm denoting by p. And the idea is the following. If you are a customer that arrive at time t with some valuation v, so you arrive here, you're represented by a point, then you wait until this point. And at this point, you decide to buy. Right? And if you arrive here, you buy upon arrival. Okay? So if you take a well-behaved P, you can prove that the equilibrium will look like that. So, and if this P is decreasing, this equilibrium will also give you a decreasing curve. Okay, so good. So now what you're looking is again for an equilibrium. I mean, an equilibrium will be a threshold function such that what I'm expressing here is exactly, I mean, it looks complicated, but it's not. It's exactly the utility of a guy arriving at time t with valuation v for buying at time s. Okay, so you have that this has to be maximized, this curve has to be decreasing, and quite naturally they have to be equal at time t. I mean, it cannot be that this function ends, I mean, up above this because someone arriving here will also buy. I mean, by the very end of the season, they will want to buy. And now what's even more interesting is that we can prove that the first order approach is enough for this. So basically, we can prove that the utility of the buyers is increasing on this part and decreasing on this part. So this is the unique local maximizer for this guy. So this guy has a unique local maximizer, which is this point. And why is that important? Well, it's important because then I can just subsume that condition, which is complicated, into a first order approach. So I just say derivative equal to 0, right? And it's a complicated formula, but there is nothing deep into it. It's just taking the derivative of the utility equal to 0, and you get that thing. Okay, so now what is the problem? As before, you write, things are a bit different because you have this psi function, but you write the revenue in very similar in spirit to what I was doing before, and you write the constraints. So this is the equilibrium constraint, and this is a new variable that you define. So the constraints are just that this is an equilibrium, and that this is T. These two things are equal at time T. So you have an optimal control problem, and that's it. You have an optimal. You can write this as an optimal control problem, and now we don't know how to solve it explicitly, but we can solve it numerically. And the situation looks like this. So I guess Rodrigo will kill me. So let me. Oh, this doesn't look so nice. Okay, well, it sort of looks. It's weird. This was not there before. Strange. Okay, so these are the price functions. So for different values of mu. So this way of writing mu sounds like very strange, but mu equals 0.1 so minus log of 0.1 means that I value the item at 1 at time 0. If I have valuation 1 at time 0, I have valuation 0.1 at time 1. That's exactly what it means. So 0.9 means that my valuation is 90% of the original valuation. 0.1 means that my valuation is 10% of the original valuation. And it's quite natural that the price goes down steeper if I have lower discount rate. So, and these are the thresholds. So it's quite interesting that for most cases, what you do is you keep the price relatively high, and you do a very sharp markdown in the end, which is something that one actually observes in practice. So prices are, there is like a selling season in which prices go down very sharply. Like within a few weeks, they mark it down to, say, 25, 30, 50, 75% even. And you do something similar with different values of lambdas. And again, so the price path look a bit different, but again, this have this sharp effect. So relatively constant price and very sharp in the end. So again, you get more revenue than the optimal mechanism, but this is all numeric. So here we don't have any closed form expression. Okay, so just to finish, one observation which is interesting is that the optimal price, not only for the discrete case, but even for the general valuation case, the optimal price path will be discontinuous for some valuations. It's not just that may be discontinuous, it will be discontinuous. So, so I think interesting questions are what happens with multiple units. That's, what actually Marcelo was saying, Mauricio was saying it's actually pretty interesting. So there is a learning part there. The right model is not very clear. What information do you give them? Do you give them there are some websites that give you the leftover seeds, for instance. If you go to like Amazon is saying how many units left on stock. Is that good or bad for them? Is it good to display the inventory or not? It's not clear, actually. It's not clear. You will need something. What about multiple units? So I mean, the question I'm really working on now is trying to actually solve the general valuation case. So we have this numeric approach, but it's all numeric, so we don't really know how the optimal price will look like. Okay, so thank you.